Okay, welcome to the Lake Stewardship and Environmental Committee meeting. I'll continue to let people in as they join us, but Tianna Burke from Georgian Bay Biosphere is here to present on how to host birds and bats on your property. And Tianna, I'll let you introduce yourself, and you can go ahead and share your screen if you'd like to do that.
Sounds great. Is that sharing okay?
That's good. Yeah, if I could ask others to mute themselves, that would be great. Do you want me to mute the township then?
Sure.
And I'll
Yeah, feel free at anytime to post a question in the chat, or we can do questions at the end, whatever works. But yes, my name is Tianna, and I'm excited to chat with you guys today about how to host birds and bats on properties, which is something that I know is happening in our township, which is great. There we go. Yeah, so my name's Tianna. A little bit about me is I have a Bachelor of Environmental Studies at the University of Waterloo. And after some work with the MNR, the Canadian Wildlife Service, some consulting, I went and did my Master's of Science at Trent University, where I actually studied ornithology. So I have a deep passion for birds and anything that is winged, pretty much. Now at the Georgian Bay Biosphere, I am their Lands and Wildlife Programs Manager. So I do a lot of work, mostly with turtles and snakes, but also some bats, birds, butterflies, and pretty much anything that is a species at risk. I also live in the township, McKellar. I have a little hobby farm down in Herdville. So this is great to be chatting with everybody today. So I have a little bit about the biosphere first, and then we'll first talk about birds, a little bit about why we should really care about them, what birds are in our area, some tips, and a little bit about the bluebird boxes that are going up, and then move over to bats. Again, why should we care about bats? Which ones are in our area, and a bit about bat boxes. And I'll end with some tips on how to host both of them. So first, about the Georgian Bay Biosphere. So we are a UNESCO designated region. So this region is basically from Port Severn all the way up to the French River. So about 200-kilometer shoreline inward to roughly the 400 highway and out to the outer islands. Of course, this is just the line, and we understand people and communities and wildlife and everything moves between these out of these boundaries. And so we work with a lot of communities, more inland and north and south of us. We are one of 4 biospheres in Ontario and 19 in Canada. And one of the reasons that we were designated a biosphere region is because we are the world's largest freshwater archipelago. So that is a chain of islands, which is pretty neat and lends a lot to the ecological importance of the region and how unique we are worldwide. And the biosphere is also, as we are part of an area of land, we are also a nonprofit charity. So while we are designated by UNESCO, UNESCO actually doesn't give us any funding. We are also not funded provincially or federally unless it's through a competitive grant process. So all of our programs, whether it be education, climate action, sustainable development, species at risk, some of the turtle work we do, all of this work is done through competitive grants, through service agreements with local townships, other organizations, and through donations. So we'll start with some birds. I think these are all my pictures that I tried to use. So I'm hoping I think most of you have your cameras on. By a show of hands, how many of you are birders? 2, okay, 3, half and half. Well, that's awesome. I've been birding professionally, I guess I would say, for maybe I'm gonna 10 years now. But I've always been interested in birds. And you can see that a lot of these ones I'm holding because I am a bird bander. So I have banded birds for a number of years. And yeah, we have roughly 300 species of breeding birds in our area along this coast. So that's quite an awesome number. And these are just breeding birds. So this doesn't actually include species that might fly through the area, but not stay here throughout the summer and the breeding season, or birds that maybe call this area home during the winter time. So for example, a snowy owl might be here in the winter, but not in the summer. And out of these 320 of these species are at risk. So that includes bobolink, whippoorwill, barn swallow, and more. So on this slide, I kind of tried to put a little bit of an array. Oh, I think you can see a little blue mouse moving around. I put a little array of bird species here, ranging from some of our predators. So our owl, a raptor, this is a northern saw-whet owl, which are actually moving right now in our area. Up on top is the black and white warbler. These guys are gone for the year, heading down to Central America. Our robins, a lot of our robins do migrate to the northern states for the winter, but they do stick around. I always get a bit of a giggle as a biologist when people say robins are the first sign of spring because they stay here year round. But they're a really cool bird. And then beside that is the American redstart. These guys are also gone for the year, heading down to the same Central America. Below that one is a pine warbler, also in the warbler family, eating insects. You probably hear these all summer long chipping away. They are also gone for the year, as is the Wilson's warbler, this other little yellow bird with a black cap. Wilson's warblers are also headed to Central America. And what hasn't arrived yet is our pine grosbeak. So this beautiful finch, larger finch bird up here is our pine grosbeak. And they tend to come here in the wintertime only. They breed pretty far up north in the boreal. And they actually, grosbeaks along with another grosbeak, the evening grosbeak, tend to show signs when their populations are high. You know, it's spruce budworm is coming back. And when the spruce budworm goes down, that's when you don't see these birds as often as well. So they're a cool bird that foresters actually look towards for signs of the environment. So why should we care about birds? There's a lot of reasons. For one, birds bring a lot of joy to people. So from a human aspect, birds bring a lot of mindfulness. They bring a lot of joy. These are just a couple quotes that I found online for people who felt positively about about birds. It was a way for them to, get out of their mind, get out of their house, look at something other than themselves, learn something new, observe something. It was a way for them to kind of get a fresh vision of the world around, and learning more about their names and learning more about them really brought them kind of a better sense, I guess, of what was there and the world around them, and just constantly that there's life around you. So birds bring a lot of joy, a lot of color, a lot of sound to the area. They also, because people love birds, they also bring, I'm skipping down my whole list here, but they also bring tourism. There's a lot of areas, if anyone's ever been to For example, Leamington to Point Pelee National Park, they have a huge birding festival that brings in a lot of tourism dollars. Chatham, Kent, that's where I'm originally from. We now have a crow festival that's bringing in some tourism, since we have a ton of crows that call Chatham their home. They tried to make the best of that, and it started a festival for it. But birds are also important environmentally. I mean, they create nutrients. They're a huge source. Their guano, their poo, is a huge source of nutrients into the soil. They distribute seeds. So all of our seed-eating birds will be basically planting trees or planting flowers of the seeds that they have collected and stored. One really fun fact, side fact about our seed birds. So for example, chickadee, blue jays, some of our woodpeckers, other types of birds that basically cache these seeds away for the winter. Around this time of year, their brains are actually growing. They're one of the few species where their brains, their hippocampus, the memory part of their brain, actually grows in size for the winter, so that it can remember all of the places that they cached these seeds. And then come spring, when they don't have to remember that anymore, it shrinks back down. That's kind of a super neat fact. Birds are also pest control. They eat a lot of things that we might consider pests, like spruce budworm is a good example of that. Some of the birds were eating a lot of the spongy moths that were affecting the trees in the area. I know I have birds that anytime I have an anthill, they'll be right on that and take care of that for me. And all of our raptors are really, really great at controlling rodent populations, which helps to control disease. Habitat creation, our birds are basically creating ecosystems for each other. Woodpeckers are a great example of creating holes in these old trees or dead standing trees. And not only do they use these areas for them, either for eating or for nesting, but these holes then afterwards are used by a number of species, whether it's chickadees using it as a nesting site, bats may use these holes as a roosting site, flying squirrels will use them to nest in. They definitely create a lot of different homes for different creatures. Disease control. Like I said, a lot of rodents carry disease, so birds and snakes are really important creatures to kind of keep that part under control. And vultures as well. Turkey vultures are one of the only vertebrate animals that eat carrion, so dead meat, exclusively. And research has actually shown that when vulture populations are falling, the number of rotting carcasses go up, and disease transfer also goes up with that. Tourism, I already touched on. And also birds are an indicator of ecosystem health. You have a really, really great forest and a really great or part of land, meadow, whatever it is, when you have more bird species. So the more number of birds that call your property home, you know you have a really great thing going for you. But unfortunately, a lot of our bird species aren't doing that great. So this is just one graph I took from something called the State of Canada's Birds. And it shows all of the different families of birds. So raptors, waterfowl, grassland birds, aerial insectivores, and how their populations have been doing over the last, since 1970. And so as you can see, some of the species are going up. So that includes raptors, waterfowl, some seabirds. They are generally going up, mostly with the removal of DDT from the environment. Our waters are becoming healthier, so all of our waterfowl and other fish-eating birds are doing better. Raptors with the removal of DDT and as well as less poisoning of rodents, they're doing a lot better. which is great. And of course, a lot of money goes towards wetland restoration and waterfowl with hunting groups. So their populations are pretty good. But when it comes to mostly our birds, honestly, that eat insects. So our shorebirds, which eat invertebrates, grassland birds, and aerial insectivores, they are pretty much declining at not a great rate. So changing it over to kind of a little bit of who's around us. Really, one of the best things I think that we can do for birds is learning about them. The more that you know about things and the more things that you can name, the more you respect them and the more that you want to do good for them. So one of the best ways to learn what's around you, there's a ton of resources out there. A few of my favorites I've put on this slide here. I really like the Merlin app. This is a free app you can download on your phone, and it shows you pictures of what's around you, but you can also press a sound button, which is really fun. And it'll listen and it'll give you a list of things that the app hears. I've used it quite often and it's mostly correct. I often hear birds that the app doesn't hear, or sometimes ID correctly. So it's a bit of a grain of salt, but it's a really great way to get started and to confirm what you hear. There's also field guides. For those of you who like a good old-fashioned book, I always carry mine with me. And eBird is really great to discover what's in your area at a certain time of year and also to keep a list. If you're one of those people who likes having lists of things you've seen before. And lastly, if you get very, very nerdy and really into birds, they of course have books that are very specific to each species or species family. So the Warbler Guide is one of my favorites, and it shows you a picture of each individual bird from every single angle you can imagine. But they also have books on hawks, hawks in flight, and hawks sitting, gulls and the different kind of gulls. So there's a lot of different things out there for whatever your interest is. And of course, just getting to know your backyard birds. So getting to know what is just immediately outside of your window to get you started. You don't have to learn everything all at once. It's great starting with just what's outside your window and then moving to, okay, what's outside now in the trees? And then, okay, what's outside of Parry Sound area? Kind of growing in what you're learning. So I didn't put any species names on this, but does anyone on the line know what any of these species are? You're welcome to unmute or type into the chat if you'd like. I see Suzanne nodding.
Okay, bottom right corner is yellow goldfinch.
Yep.
Bottom left would be ruby-throated hummingbird. Top left, is that a yellow warbler?
Close.
Which one is it?
This one is our pine warbler.
Pine warbler, thank you. I'm not good with my warblers. Mark is better. He was just up here and he scooted to go start dinner. He's the birder. And ruffed grouse? No, ruffed grouse?
It is.
It is. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, there's these are all pictures actually taken from right outside my window. So a pine warbler singing in a tree, a ruffed grouse. This guy was drumming out behind my house. Our ruby-throated hummingbird was at our bird feeder. And then there's actually two species in this bottom picture. The one is the American goldfinch, and then the one that is a little more speckled is a pine siskin. And so pine siskins are mostly around in the wintertime. And how to kind of start learning, start getting better. There's a bunch of things. The first, I'm going to start on the right of this slide. is learning shapes. So what does it look like? How can you describe how the body is shaped, how the head is shaped? The feet, is it a foot that maybe is for swimming, or is it a foot for walking, for perching, for climbing? What is the bill like? Is it one that would be in mud like a duck? Is it one that's really tiny like a pair of tweezers that would be for catching insects? Is it a thick bill like a finch's for cracking seeds? Those are all kind of ideas and things to think about when you're trying to describe what you see, so then you can go back and actually figure it out. Another one is patterns. So how is the bird behaving? One of my favorites to describe is a northern harrier. When it's flying, it kind of reminds me of like you're stumbling home, kind of flapping really quickly and then gliding and then flapping to correct it to go back to straight flying and then soaring again. In this little comic, there is foraging patterns. So a brown creeper goes up a tree, a white nuthatch, like a nut falls down, goes down the tree, sapsuckers kind of go around horizontally. They're all kind of little things that you can observe to figure out what you're looking at. And then of course there's one of my favorite things to do, which is mnemonics, which is basically putting human words to bird sounds. So if you hear, well, catbirds meow, but you might also hear the ovenbird, which says teacher, 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 or a yellow warbler, which is sweet, sweet, I'm so sweet. So as you start hearing things and remembering the words of what they're saying, so to speak, you can start remembering, oh, this, I hear something saying that sounds like it's saying drink my tea. That must be a towhee. And it helps you kind of start to ID things. So one example is this bird. Oh, I did put the name, a white-throated sparrow. And if I were to describe this, I would say that it's a smallish bird, brown back with a grayish white chest. The throat is white. It has 3 lines on the crown of white with some black as well, lines in between that. And then its eyebrows, it has 2 yellow bits. It also has kind of a longer tail. It looks like it eats seeds because its bill is relatively chunky. And then I would go back and kind of figure out what that was. Luckily, I love birds like this because they are actually named for how they look. So white-throated sparrow, it has a white throat. It makes it a little easy. And then they are a bird that has human words to the sound, which is sweet home Canada, Canada, Canada. So I'm just quickly trying to find it in my app. I hope this comes through this sound, but hopefully you'll be able to hear the sweet home Canada, Canada in it. Hopefully you can hear the sweet home Canada, Canada in that. These guys are coming around right now. Actually, they are getting a little more populous as they arrive for the winter time. So next, Jen wanted me to cover a little bit about the bluebird project that is going on in the McKellar area. I was chatting with some of the guys who are heading up this project, and it's really exciting. Some of the stuff that they're doing and the uptake of birds that has been happening. So I put a little map that shows you just a ton of pins of where all these boxes are. So over the last 2-3 years, they have been putting up bluebird boxes around the McKellar area, and obviously going south towards Orville and even a little bit more north or east towards Amherst Harbor. And a total 250 boxes have been put up. So this is super, super awesome. In 2021, almost half, just over half of the boxes were actually occupied by different species of birds. And so far for this year, Jeremy, I know he's on, was kind enough to throw together some current numbers. He hasn't inputted all of the numbers yet for this year. So right now they're standing at 32% of the bluebird boxes, or boxes being actually inhabited by bluebirds. Half of them being inhabited by tree swallows. And then less than that is house wrens, and then a single black-capped chickadee nest. So these are obviously all cavity nesting birds. Naturally, these would be nesting probably honestly in woodpecker holes, but with less dead standing trees that are on, I guess, edges of forests. They obviously prefer to have these bluebird boxes because it's easy homes for them. So this is super awesome, and I hope that it keeps going. There's some exciting stuff that could come from it, some cool research. So for those interested in having bluebird boxes or putting some up, the best places to put these is in very sunny areas, basically as sunny as possible, keeping them away from deep shade especially. Bluebirds specifically prefer large expanses of short grass. So ideally you see them facing fields, but they don't like to be too close to houses or to feeders, only because they're quite, they're not very sociable birds. They don't like a lot of activity around them. They don't like being around humans very much. So placing them in kind of isolated areas is preferred. Off of the ground, preferably 5 to 10 feet. And then obviously we don't want them to be swaying, so it should be pretty stationary. Bluebirds, like those numbers showed, aren't the only ones who use these boxes. There are also house wrens, so this little guy on the left, as well as tree swallows. Tree swallows are one of my favorites, so I'm always excited when I see them in my boxes. House wrens are super cute and noisy, and I love them because of how sassy they are. They are actually known to go into already claimed boxes, and if they want that box because they like it, they will chuck eggs out of it, and they will evict whatever bird was in it before. So they're funny, they're great. So for taking a look at these boxes, monitoring them helps us know what is nesting in them, and also how successful are they? Did they lay eggs? Did they have babies? So monitoring should be from a distance so that you obviously don't spook the birds too much or don't potentially make them leave the nest. And especially after the 12th to 13th day of being a hatchling, this might cause the chicks to basically jump out and prematurely fledge their nest. And we want to avoid disrupting as much nest material as we can. And once a year, it's always great to remove all of the material from these nests. That's something I still have to do on my fall checklist. And really the removal of this nesting material helps to remove parasites. And so there's a lot of parasites that birds have. And the more times they renest in the same box, the more the parasites will grow, because they can survive winter in there. And the bird's health will decline each time they nest because of how many parasites are there. So taking all the nesting material out really reduces that for them. Area on our property. So Jen says the only area on our property that is cleared is the large septic area. Would it be all right to put a birdhouse on the edge of that behind the house? Also, how close together can the bird boxes be? Yeah, like Jeremy said, large fields are definitely best. Septic beds tend to be very, very small. If I were to have one on my septic bed, which faces a forest, I would probably expect to get maybe a chickadee or house wren. You definitely would not get bluebirds. I have fields with sheep and donkey on it, and our bluebirds came and checked it out and didn't like it, this year at least. So I would say that you can still put one up, you just probably won't get bluebirds, and probably not tree swallows either. So one of the cool things that could happen with this project, if it goes through, could be bird banding. And bird banding is a really, really great way to learn more about species, species that live here. So in my hand, in these photos, you can see over here is a Swainson's thrush, and it has a little metal band on it. And so basically this band has a identifying code, and this code is unique for each bird. And whenever this bird is found in another location, usually a bird banding site or a bird banding lab, they can see where it's been before. So a lot of the data from bird banding has been used to figure out how old do these birds live? Where do they migrate to and from? At what times do they migrate? We check their fat and for parasites, and so we can really determine how healthy they are, how healthy is the habitat around them. There's a lot of really awesome questions that we can answer. And then another, the bird beside this is a broadwing hawk. So that's a really cool banding project that is going on in this area and through Rousseau and Oroville and Muskoka. The Lake Simcoe County Raptors Research Group is heading this up. And so I definitely recommend anybody who sees a broadwing hawk sitting on a wire or flying or in a tree to take a look at it, because it may have a band on it. And definitely let someone in that group know, or you can let me know as well, what the band was that you saw and where. And it's some really cool information. We can tell where it came from, where it was captured, how long ago that was. It's really a neat project. Is there banding done in our area? This raptor banding is done. We've also, they don't only target broadwing hawks, but they also targeted redtails, rough-legged hawks. And then in the wintertime, this group also in the Barrie area does snowy owl banding. They have a snowy owl project. So it's a very large number of species, and they also partner with a lot of different bird groups and bird researchers to do this kind of work. It's pretty awesome. How difficult is it to see the information on a band? The small metal bands, it's quite difficult. Generally, you have to have them in your hands again. Before the broadwing hawk project, it is like this big band you see on this bird here. So T88 was this bird that we caught. And it's pretty easy to see if you have binoculars. Binoculars on you, and a lot of people will take a picture of the bird and the band and send that in. So it's pretty good if you have binoculars. And yeah, it really tells a lot about migration patterns, age of the birds, species composition. So what types of birds are where. There's been some years where it would be a certain time of year and we would expect to be seeing a certain bird species, and it doesn't come, or it's late, or there's not many of them. And so it kind of gives you a really great idea of what's happening in the habitat and in the ecosystem around the area, but also nationally too. And then it really shows site fidelity. So do these birds come back? Are these bluebirds nesting in the same box? Are they nesting in the same field? Or Where do they go? Where do their babies go? It's some pretty cool questions that can get answered. So moving from birds to our other winged friends, bats, why should we care about bats? So similar to birds, they do create a lot of nutrients. So their guano, their poo is very good for our soil. They are amazing at pest control. A little brown bat, I believe, eats over 100 mosquitoes per hour. So that is a lot of mosquitoes out of our hair. Disease control, they are very good for obviously keeping down any diseases that are spread by insects. Tourism, believe it or not, people actually go places to see bats. One of the biggest bat colonies that people travel to is in Texas under a bridge. And it's a very, very popular tourist destination actually for them. And bats are a really huge indicator of ecosystem health. So how are bats doing is really representative of how are insects doing, how's the habitat around us doing. So in our area, there are 8 bat species and 4 of these are at risk. So half of the bat species here are at risk. We have, let me go through them, our big brown bats. I did put a kind of a fun fact for each of them. So these guys are our communal roosters. They nest in very large colonies, up to 700. If you have bats in your attic or in a bat box, it's most likely our big browns. Hoary bats, they migrate over 3,000 kilometers. So that's pretty amazing for a bat to do. These guys are really cute. They're adorable. They remind me of little teddy bears. Little brown bats are also ones that you'll find in a bat box or possibly an attic. There it is. They can eat 10 mosquitoes per minute, and they are listed as endangered now. Northern bats are also listed as endangered. Banding of bats has found that these guys can live up to 19 years old. Eastern red bats, they are not on the endangered list yet. Their cool fact is that they mate in flight. Silver-haired, they're my favorite bat. They're one of the slowest flying ones at only 18 kilometers an hour. And then our last 2 endangered bat species is the eastern small-footed and tricolored bat. So the tricolored bat is really neat. They specifically roost in dead leaf clusters and trees. So those dead leaves that you see, there might be these bats in them. And then eastern small-footed bat, the pups are actually 20% of the mother's weight, so they're babies. And they fly around with their pups. So that's pretty impressive. And I mean, bats, as we know, aren't doing the best as insect eaters. They are in a population decline. So this is for a variety of reasons, such as habitat destruction, but also persecution, pesticide use, which is reducing our insects and wind turbines, among many other issues. Over worldwide, I guess there are 26 critically endangered. And the ones here have mostly been put into the at-risk category because of a huge decline in their populations related to white nose syndrome. I'm not sure if anyone here is familiar with white nose syndrome, but it is basically a fungus. And so this fungus came from overseas by rock cavers, basically. First showed up in Albany, New York, and the transmission is basically contact with contaminated surfaces. So the fungus spores were on these cavers. They went into these caves. The spores then transferred to the rocks, and when the bats came in to roost over winter, they became contaminated with it. So mortality is related to the effect that it has on hibernation. So they don't necessarily die of the fungus, but instead what's happening is it makes their any skin, so around their nose, around their wings. You can see in this picture actually The wings and the nose of this bat looks kind of fuzzy. So that's the spores. And what it does is it makes them very itchy, makes them wake up. And when bats are woken up during hibernation, it means they're thirsty, their blood starts flowing, their heart rate goes high, they start becoming hungry. And of course, it's in the middle of winter, so they are not able to get food. And so most of them, it's because of starvation. So for our northern long-eared, little brown and tricolored, it's been estimated that about 90% of their populations have declined. So there is good news, though, that some bats have been found to have almost a scar tissue on them. So it is exciting that some have survived and been able to roost and hibernate through this. So the scar tissue kind of shows that they were able to basically continue hibernation and almost become immune. So the hope is that researchers will figure out ways not only to remove the spores from them, but also figure out why some bats seem to be a little more immune to this fungus than others. And hopefully the ones that are breeding breed genetics that are immune. So if you're interested in bat boxes, there are a ton of designs. This is just a small selection that I pulled pictures of. The one on the right here is essentially a rocket box. It's almost a nursery colony. So these can house hundreds of bats in them. These are the most typical ones you would see. These have about 4 chambers in them. The ones that are most commonly sold in like a Canadian Tire home hardware would be ones like this. And then there's ones where you can put them back to back. The nice, I think I'm going to be talking a bit about it in a slide or two, but the nice thing about having them back to back like this is that the bats can have a preference of what they want. So if it's very sunny and very hot, they can always move towards the shadier part of the box. Or if they're too cold, they can move towards the sunnier part of the box. So it really allows them to thermoregulate during their stay. So really 6+ hours of sun is great for these boxes. They do, for maternity colonies, want them to be quite warm. And water, it's really great to have water nearby and natural vegetation. Where you've seen bats before is where you're probably going to be most successful. And they should be mounted quite high. Bats can actually not take off from the ground. They have to be dropping in order to gain enough, and in order to gain flight. So mount it as high as you can and make sure the bottom is open so that the guano can fall out and not contaminate the inside. And of course, maintenance is important. So if there's wasps' nest in it, take that out, make sure to clean out any spider webs and make it as inhabitable as you can. Our website on gbbr.ca under species at risk. And then if you click on one of our bat species, there are a number of different guides on how to build these boxes for yourself. And I also recommend really any box that you can find at a store that is more than 1 chamber. It's really important that there are multiple chambers in a box so that bats can thermoregulate, because it has been found that in very, very hot years, if there is only 1 chamber in that box and they aren't able to regulate, they can overheat. So quickly, some other ways to help bats and birds. One is bird feeders, not necessarily to put them out, but to make sure that if you do put them out, to keep them clean. Maintenance is very, very important with these because bird feeders, are ways where birds congregate, and where creatures congregate is easy. It makes it easier to spread disease. So the cleaner that you can keep these objects means the healthier that you're keeping the birds. So generally every other time that I fill my bird feeders, that is when I'm going to be cleaning them in warm soapy water. And it's especially important for hummingbird feeders because it is sugar water. And so sugar water can mold quite quickly in warm weather. So these should be changed actually every few days and washed thoroughly. Window collisions. So making your home bird friendly by putting stickers in your windows, by putting blinds up, basically anything that will break the reflection of the outdoors on your glass is super important. About 25 million birds die every year just from windows. And mostly daytime collisions are due to these reflections of the habitat around them. And there's also nighttime collisions from nighttime migrants. A lot of our birds do travel at night during migration. So these little stickers do help. What else? And being a responsible pet owner is huge. Half of Canada's cats are outdoor cats. And not only do cats face huge risks being outside, anything from vehicle mortality to predation from wildlife. There's also a high level of feline diseases that they can catch and also diseases that they can bring home to you. But they also kill up to 350 million birds per year, it's estimated. So that's more than windows, that's more than wind turbines, that's a huge number. That could be brought down just by having your cat inside, or like mine is in this picture on a leash and controlled. So cats have been contributed to the extinction of 34 species worldwide, which is pretty crazy. Other ways is maintaining natural roosts, so keeping those dead trees standing, as long as it is not a safety issue. Leaving these trees standing means you're keeping a lot of homes for birds and bats on your property. Decorating with boulders, that gives a nice warm face to increase heat for them. Using linear features, so like hedgerows and tree lines, a lot of birds and bats will follow these linear lines to travel. And removing artificial lighting. So artificial lighting really helps to reduce the number of nighttime strikes by them. And wildlife friendly gardens. I mean, I love gardening. I know a lot of people in our community love to garden. And so planting ones that attract insects is really great for our birds and bats. It's not necessarily attracting mosquitoes, but rather moths and other types of insects that are favorable to birds and bats. So by doing this, you can do different colors of flowers, different fragrances and different shapes. So all of these things attract different types of insects to the flowers. Pale flowers, so like our daisies, the pearly everlasting is a type of native species. Those can be seen in low light because they're white. And so that's really great for our bats trying to find insects at night. Kind of rotating between flowers that maybe are single to bunches, flowers that have a landing platform. So like those black-eyed Susans in the bottom is great for insects to land on. Basically all the different sizes and shapes you can think of. And it's also important to plant flowers that bloom at different times of year. So you want to make sure that your garden has things blooming from April all the way until now in October, to kind of give as much food as you possibly can to the bats and birds. There's a link on this slide to one of our conservation guides. It's called, there's one that's best for the biosphere, and then there's also a monarch guide. And it has really, really great resources for all of our native plants, what colors they are, how tall they are, what type of habitat they like, and when they're flowering. So it's a really great winter exercise to do to plan for your gardens the coming spring. And some of those management tips, but there's also a ton more that can be found in 2 of our guides online too that might be of help to some people who are interested in learning more. So one of them is Life on the Bay. It's a stewardship guide, basically on how to better your property for our wildlife and for environment as a whole. And we also have another one that is a habitat screening tool. So it's kind of if you're interested in building or expanding your home or cottage, basically what to look out for, how to know if something is possibly habitat or goes beyond bats and birds, goes into snakes and turtles, and what you can do to kind of mitigate those threats to those species. And with that, I will take any questions that you might have. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Tianna. Does anybody have any questions? You can just unmute yourself and ask them. I had one about bats, but I can't find it right now.
I forgot to put my contact on this end slide, so I just put it into the chat if anyone wants to connect afterwards.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, no, it's been I've learned a lot tonight, so I really appreciate that. Let me see if there are any questions. I can look in the chat. Okay, no, I don't see anything but a thank you. So it was great that you answered questions as you went along.
I see a hand up by Melanie.
Oh, Melanie has a hand up. Go ahead, Melanie. Oh, I think that was never mind, I hit the wrong button. Did you have a question, Melanie? She's on the phone. So.
Oh.
No, okay. Anyway,
can you hear me now?
Can
you hear me now,
yes.
Jennifer?
Yes, yes.
Okay, good. I was having trouble because I'm not used to doing Zoom on my phone. One of the questions that we've had from the community is about perception that geese are increasing. And when I started looking into it for people, it's like, well, yes, they are, but if the Canada goose is just coming back to its healthy population. So although in recent years, like since the 1970s, the levels of their population do seem to go up. It's just like our raptors coming back, like the bald eagles and other beautiful birds. The geese are coming back too, because they're not as affected by those pollutants. And although maybe Canada geese are not as majestic as a bald eagle, they are still an important part of our ecosystem and a really important part of food webs for everybody. So would you have any advice that we could share? Some of the things that we were able to find were things like making sure that you don't have grass going right down to the waterfront, having good healthy shoreline planting is one way to sort of deter geese from coming, and there's nothing they seem to like as much as a fresh green lawn with new shoots. So another good reason to have a really nice biodiverse something on your property instead of grass. Do you have any more tips for us for people who are looking to not encourage Canada geese to join them in their summer properties, especially?
Yeah,
but also farmers. Farmers are concerned about like the number of geese who come and are interested in their crops at certain times of year too, right? So everybody learning to live together.
Yeah, definitely. Geese. The goose question is one that I have a lot of the time, actually. It's a great question. the goose population is kind of a couple-fold question, actually. It probably is them coming back to their original population sizes, which I don't know if we actually truly know what their historical population is, only because it never really was a question until birds started declining. So I'm not sure if we know what that historical is, but there are also two types of Canada geese. A lot of our geese traditionally were migratory geese, so long distance migratory from Arctic populations flying south. And then there's also more resident geese. And so it's the resident goose population that is definitely is increasing, especially as preferable habitat for them is increasing. So what you're talking about with those grassy shorelines, grassy parks, those kinds of areas are definitely helping with that. But for living alongside each other, it's definitely all about shorelines. And if you make something unpreferable to them, then they'll leave it for sure. So if you have a really nice buffer on the edge of your shoreline, so kind of those shrubs or even flower gardens, something that makes it a little more inconvenient to get them up onto the shore, that would definitely help. Converting a lot of that grass into gardens, into native gardens, would definitely build up kind of your landscaping, really, which would be unpreferable to the geese, but more preferable to other birds that may use those plants for seed, food, for catching insects. Excuse me. And then also another one I would say, oh my gosh. Excuse me. Another thing would definitely be encouraging people to not feed the geese. And that goes for geese, ducks, all waterfowl. They do have enough food. And so there's not really a need for spreading seed for them on your lawn, or especially not feeding bread to them. Because not only is bread just kind of a filler food, it's actually quite unhealthy and has absolutely no nutrition for them. So those are the two things. Definitely has a lot to do with habitat and making your shoreline uninhabitable for the geese.
Okay, does anybody else have any further questions? Okay, well, I'm going to thank you so much, Tianna, for giving us this fascinating presentation. And I really look forward to looking at it again, because I know I'm going to have to do that. And just to absorb it all. I was writing, but I couldn't write quickly enough.
Oh, no worries.
So,
Thank you for letting me go a little overtime. I could talk forever about birds. So,
well, your enthusiasm is infectious. That's just great. So thanks again. You're welcome to stay for our meeting if you want to. I'm going to stop the recording now, and then we'll have our regular